All right, welcome back. Excited to see everyone back here. Obviously, great to have a second bye week. Called it a big self-awareness week. A lot of self-reflection. We call self-awareness a superpower, right? So we got to be man enough to look at what we do well, what we don't do well, and go out there and attack those solutions. There's a lot of areas that we talked about last Thursday I think are really important. And then to come back here on homecoming, it's going to be awesome, right? SMU, a great opponent, team that's playing really well. Coach Lashley, I believe the stat is, Will gave this to me, they're 11-0 in the regular season ACC. So what a stat that is. Quarterback number 7 is a tremendous player. Actually reminds me a little bit of Cam Ward. Plays tremendous off script and just flicks the ball and find guys late and makes big explosive plays. Really athletic on the perimeter, really athletic at the offensive line, and then defensive line is an absolute problem. I mean, anytime you roll out a defensive line that has all single digits, there's a reason why they're wearing those numbers, okay? And they completely dominated the Clemson game. They're one of the best in the country at taking the ball away and creating short fields for their offense. So we're excited about this challenge. And then obviously homecoming, back at a Legacy Federal Credit Union Stadium. What an opportunity for Demon Deacon Nation. We haven't been home in 4 weeks. Our faculty, our students, our alumni, former players, just a tremendous opportunity to show up for a football team through the first 6 weeks, have gotten better each and every occasion. And, Saturday will be another step in this journey that we're really excited about. Our guys have been working their tail off last week in the bye week, and they're going to take another step forward. So you can make a difference, right? If you're out there, if you're indifferent about coming to the game, it's going to be an amazing college football game. We get that great noon kickoff, and I'm excited about our team and our preparation and what I've seen in this room leading up to this point. So with that, I'll kind of open it up to any questions.
Jake, with the self-scouting last week, what things did you find that have been working well? What things need to be addressed moving forward?
I think that's the biggest thing. I think it's easy to point to some of the negative, like offensively, going right back, immediately diving into the red zone. We're 3 of 16 on third down in the red zone. You're not going to be able to score points, keep drive alive, and finish with points. That just means we're not getting on schedule. We're not quite finishing blocks to, I think, the standard of what we're capable of on the perimeter and in the interior. And our sudden change offense has not been productive. I know we only have 6 takeaways, and that's one thing on defense that we want to do a little bit better because we believe we can have more than one a game. But we need to finish those situations. Now, offensively, what has saved us, I guess you would say, is explosive play rate is really high. I talked about in Oregon State, we had about 7 shot plays in that game. I think we hit on 5 of them, right? So Chris Barnes has been a bright spot. Whoever's been at quarterback, Deshaun came in and did some good things. We're protecting the quarterback, I think, at a really good rate. We need to continue to do that. Defensively, too many penalties that have led to, explosive plays, right? When you get a pass interference, when you get 4 roughing the quarterbacks, those are 15-yard explosive play penalties, and teams are capitalizing on that from us. Too many third and shorts. I think we've been good on third down, but too many people have been successful on first and second down, and our fourth quarter finish on that side of the ball. We need to continue to work to slam the door shut. We've been good in the 2-minute drill, but converting to those situations, we need to be a little bit better. And then, special teams. We had the 5 explosive plays against Oregon State and probably left 3 out there. It really was a bad taste in our mouth, but Chris has proven to be really explosive in the kickoff return game. People just can't look and say, hey, we're just going to kick this guy the ball. Punt return is where we've left the most out there. And our punting game just hasn't materialized. I think we're netting 35 yards a punt, so we got to continue to be creative in that realm when those situations happen, to be more explosive, like punting the ball. And that's protection coverage, that's Cal, that's a lot of different things. So a lot of points for the coaches that we need to get better at, and I think everyone got rested and recharged, and we're ready to attack this final 6-week stretch.
On the rested and recharged front, how much further along is Robbie from where he was last week when we talked to you? It's only been Thursday.
Yeah.
What does this week look like at quarterback?
So we practiced limited Thursday, just kind of indie. Friday he worked into a couple sessions. We'll talk today that, he's got to go out there and tomorrow and really cut it loose. He'll be there in the walkthrough tonight and going through all the preparation points. But Falili will be practicing this week. Robbie will be practicing this week, and we'll see how far along we can get those guys. And against a really good opponent like SMU, we're going to need their production.
Jake, what do you think what do you think you accomplished the most in the bye week? And then how important was it to get those guys away for a couple days? You told us they were going to get Saturday and Sunday off.
Well, from a player standpoint, we're going to be on an extreme grind the next 6 weeks, and 3 of those games being on the road, 3 of them here. I think you need to have purposeful rest and re-energizing throughout the course of a long season. So I think that was important, and guys, anywhere from staying here and rehabbing to going home to doing a bunch of different things. I think it's big for the staff. Now, I'm terrible with time off. Okay, I'm really bad. But we got some pumpkins carved on Sunday. That was a big deal. I'm the best there is at, kind of taking the guts out and finding the seeds, right? So we've done a couple of those things, but, my mind firmly was on, what this team needs to do to keep getting better. But it was good to have some of those points that, we can come back to. And I thought everyone showed up to Monday's lift in the morning, focused, energized, and ready to go. And that's been the calling card of our team.
Jake, on the wide receiver room, it feels like those guys are starting to take some more steps and more steps. What have you seen out of the growth from them? And I guess, when you look at your self-awareness, what's the next step for them?
Yeah, I still think as we've looked at the first 6 games, really proud of the growth that they've had in that room because I think when you start and then you can see as it's all kind of intermixed, those guys have gained a little bit more confidence. Micah Mays, in my opinion, has probably been the most consistent. Chris obviously has been the most explosive. Carlos, probably don't want to talk too much about him, but I feel like he's got his groove back a little bit. And then those guys have to keep pressing, Sterling and Jeremiah and Karate and some of those backup guys to stay sharp because their number will be called. So, happy with Coach Edwards, happy with the development of that room, happy with how they're kind of gelling a little bit together with whatever quarterback has been there. And those guys will need to continue to make plays, because we're going to get a lot of press coverage this week. We're going to get a lot of man-to-man. We're going to get a lot of teams that are coming out and attacking us. And we got to combat that with those guys winning some one-on-ones.
On the other side of that, SMU, the team that, explosively outside, they want to run the ball a lot when they're popping on the run game. How do you what's your message to your guys to keep them disciplined kind of in that run game? So that way, you're not living in those 3rd and 2nd, 3rd and 1s on defense.
They absolutely dominated Clemson's offensive line. Watch the tape. They could not block number 9 wherever they put him. So we got to understand the physicality that's required, before we put our hand in the dirt. So we have to run the ball, and I know I stay up here and say that every week. We got to be schematic in how we do it. We got to get great matchups, but we got to do it in a variety of different ways. Just to say, hey, we're going to go run zone against these guys 30 times and have success. It's going to be running the quarterback. It's going to be getting demand in one-on-one situations in space, and it's going to be our continued growth. I remember after week 3 in that bye week, where it was we're missing the entry points and our hat placement's bad. We've done a good job coaching-wise getting those back on track. And we've been getting a lot of those, 5, 7. We haven't gotten a run. I know DeMond's against Oregon State was wide open, but, we just need a couple more of those churning runs to keep them off track and then, to make them respect our play-action pass game. Right now I would say defensively they're probably going to say, hey, make sure you don't get over the top. Let them run a little bit. So we're going to run against some light boxes, and we got to be able to efficiently go out and attack those guys.
Jake, before the game Saturday, there'll be a Residence Hall dedication for Larry at Hopkins. Of course, Larry, former Wake Forest football player. What does that mean for both the program and for the university to have that dedication for both those folks, arguably both trailblazers?
Yeah, I think you used the right word, trailblazers. Beth and Dr. Hopkins have tremendous legacies here at Wake Forest. Obviously, Dr. Hopkins as a player and Beth as, being here and doing a lot of different things. I just feel like it's great to pass on the legacy to our players, and we'll talk about it before the dedication. So we're just excited about, the legacy that they have left. And Beth, I've gotten to meet a bunch of times, throughout the course. I love her energy. Every time you're around her, it's just great to, to be able to carry on their legacy, and they are trailblazers, and that legacy will continue at Wake Forest.
Jake, we had talked last week about the growth of the team during the time off and what they were going utilizing that, but you also mentioned growth of the staff and the things that they needed to take away from it and changes in the learning curve. What did that look like in the last week to you?
Well, I think that's the biggest thing when I talk about like not having rose-colored glasses on, and I think, you get the self-scouts and, we have, every resource known to mankind, right? We get all the AI reports and all this stuff, right? But it's like, what does that really mean? Like I said, there's facts and there's truths, right? There's some facts of what we're doing, but what is the truth? Like, what is the real problem to the, what's the real solution to the problem that we're trying to find? And I think it takes really good coaches to say, hey, I thought Scotty was very nitpicky on some of the things that they need to get better at, but that's exactly the mode that you need to be in. Never be satisfied, always keep pressing. And I think the biggest thing with the coaches is just creating that urgency that's required. Like, we are in the middle of the season. When you start something, you have that like initial kickoff energy, right? When you get to the last 2 weeks, like, you get that finish energy. Like, we're right in the muck, right in the mud of like, we need to push through, and we got tremendous opponents that we're going to play. So what an opportunity for our guys. So I think as coaches, like, take a great responsibility to like your room, your individual preparation, and like what we're doing to get these guys ready. So, from my standpoint, that's one of my number one job. Those 10 assistants, that's my position, coach room. So I got to make sure these guys are on a healthy edge to make sure that we're feeling good about what we're doing and keep pressing, I think, those guys and our players.
It's something I failed to ask you about Thursday, which I had intended to.
Mm-hmm.
Someone out of left field, shocking, I know. Your thoughts on the change in the portal window, getting rid of the spring portal, shortening it to 2 weeks, getting rid of the December portion of the portal?
It's multifaceted. Okay, supportive of one portal window. Like, we had to have it. You can debate when and how. The biggest thing I don't like, I was a big fan of putting a communication window in December, right? So we could get ourselves to a position where we can get to know these kids, right? And, they can say who's in, and we can get transcripts, and we can meet and talk numbers and contracts before they even get here. Now it's going to be a mad dash for 15 days. Okay, the other thing I think, because of the one window that we've all just agreed with, that, hey, tampering's okay. That's, to me, what one window represents in January. So, because you're going to get a great window in December to negotiate with your players. I do appreciate that. I think that is something that can be an emphasis while focused on a bowl game or whatever you're doing in the CFP. But to not to get an opportunity to communicate with people before the visit window, I think is a big miss. Okay, I do like it that it's in January, that I finally get a whole team, right, for one calendar year. I think that's really, really important. But it's going to cause a mad dash unlike any other. And I think there'll be, because of one window, maybe a few more kids left behind because, there's some magic to it, right? So I think there's a lot that goes on. I think our game is still evolving. I think the second big conversation is what happens with the collective in the NILs, right? I think you're seeing reports out there of people saying, well, we're just going to pay anyway. To me, if the schools promise money, right, knowing the College Sports Commission and the hard salary cap was coming, like, that's on us, right? And I think you have people from the other side of the collectives that want to keep making their money, right? So I think we're in a tough spot as far as like how that goes and how that's regulated and how that's managed, because I think, with the salary caps and letting this all play out, this can be a really positive thing. So these are all working in unison, all in real time. And we got to be able to navigate and attack that portal process because, we'll probably be in, another big cycle of having some opportunity to add value to our team.
Follow up to that, in past years, at least the last year or two, in this room and at other schools across the country, we've heard coaches talk about they're having to have conversations in late October, early November with players who are being contacted by other schools. Have you been in that position yet so far here?
Awesome question. Because I've been in that situation in the past, and I'm not making any excuses, but focus is real. And one thing we talked about is just controlling your environments. We're not going to negotiate our contracts till after the season and after the full we're paying on production, not potential, right? So we're going to let that all play out. I think everyone in the program will have priority guys that they want to take care of early and first, and then kind of work through your roster. And then you got the incoming guys. Like, there's a lot to work through. That's why Rob Schlager is the best in the country, right? So our guys need to be focused on finishing these games, right? I think that's the best part about the January window is it does allow that to happen, and it's very much needed. And the same thing happens in coaching, right? You got to be focused on what you're doing, right? So that was the message. Controlling your environment is something we talk about a lot in this room, and who you let into those conversations and who you're listening to, and are you getting the truth? And all those things are really, really important to our guys' success, and we support that.
Coach, the videos after games in the locker room, the celebration videos, they're awesome. Are those comments and speeches from you, are they organic, or do you plan? Because they are awesome.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And, Mitch and his staff in our creative department has done an absolutely amazing job. I think from the moment we got here, we talked about like kind of unveiling the curtain a little bit about what happens in these rooms. We'll always have like a theme of the week, and some of that is very prepared, very structured, very organized. So I don't watch all of them. I should, right? I just make sure, hey, Mitch, make sure they're edited, right? We talk a little crazy every once in a while in those rooms. But like in the game stuff, that's just emotional, competitive banter and what I feel the guys need to talk about, here at that time. So that's just like a feeling of what the team needs. And but I've always been a big believer that today's athlete, doesn't just need you talking about something, but you need to bring it to life and they need to feel it. And I think that's really important. It's part of our makeup, our mantra, and like who we are as a program. So love doing it, but at the same time, like it's cool to get it out there and let everyone see a little bit of like what's behind the curtain of our program.
Jake, you alluded to it a little bit in the beginning, but when you're going against such stiff competition, 11-0, a team that's never lost a conference game here, and you have a huge stretch in front of you, just how important is getting this homecoming win leading into this final gauntlet that you guys have?
Well, I think the biggest thing we stress is, we've done a good job of creating opportunities for ourselves. And I think that's what the SMU game represents, to have it back at home, to have them have to come over, they were just in Clemson and have to come back this way, I think is important. We're just focused on playing our best, if I'm just being honest. And I think that's what it's going to take the final 6 weeks. Our guys have worked for these type of opportunities and to play on this big stage. And that's what I mean about that stadium. Like, it needs to be the type of level of game that it has the billings for. And that's two good football teams that are going to be competing their tail off, and we get them at home. So I'm excited about that for our guys. This is why you come to Wake Forest, to play in these moments. And obviously SMU was ready for this transition, to the type of success that they have had, and pretty noted the type of resources that they put into this thing. So excited about just the challenge, and that you want to play against the best. I think that's where our guys come here, and to have it here in Winston-Salem is going to be an awesome thing for our guys in our community.
Anything else for Coach Ness?
Coach, I've asked about Brock before, but you brought up Scotty. You kind of him being nitpicky. The last few stops for Scotty have been really good. Kansas State, Michigan State was a little rough for him, and then he goes and maybe reinvents himself in Texas. What have you seen since you've known him for a while? What have you seen out of the growth out of him as a coach over the last since January? Yeah,
I mean, keep going back. Really good at Wyoming. Okay, really good at North Dakota State. I meant it. I would not be standing in front of you if it wasn't for that man. Being a great mentor, being a great leader, pouring into me. Even when I was a young coach, like chewing my ass a little bit because I needed. I thought I knew everything. But just his approach. He taught me exactly how to approach this game, how to prepare this game, how to cultivate a culture within your organization and why it's important, how to be authentically yourself. Like, I don't have any beard rules, right? You know what I mean? Like, that's who he is. And I'm proud of him for that, because if there's someone that is just himself, it is Scotty Hazelton. But the work is there. So that's why I trust him so much, and seeing him behind the scenes. I know when we originally talked, the Texas stuff he brought was all the multiple front stuff. I thought that really, really changed the game as far as like how this defense has evolved. And sometimes you need those things, right? You need to, like, in Michigan State's situation was bad, period, right? So, but to get another year where you can just go and learn and see and grow, I think he shows all of us coaches that we're lifelong learners, and we need to be, right? You can't just be so entrenched in one thing. I've been at fault of that probably in the last couple of years at Washington State, of just like, wanting to do a square peg in a round hole. And I think he's done a really good job of like evolving our personnel to what he wants to do. So credit to him. It starts with him, but he got a really connected staff really on this whole team, and it just starts with his leadership and how he kind of views those guys in the room. He never shuts down ideas, right? I think that's the mark of a great leader, and Scotty's done a tremendous job, and our players really believe in what we're doing. All right, thanks everybody. My Brewers are out. I'm not telling you though,